Hey guys, welcome to Dad Talk. Today we got a special edition, a live Q&A with the Ask the Candidate. We are here with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Alan, how you doing?
I'm doing very good, Eric. And like I said off air, you need to change this to granddad talk. I've graduated from that grad, thing, just dad. So, and streamline all these links and stuff. Make it easy for us old gray-haired guys.
Yes, sir. I might have to do that. It would be good to have a granddad talk. But Alan, I kind of want to jump into this. I have seen your issues page where you talk about protecting children and families in the state of Texas, and it is by far one of the best platforms that I have seen. How do you plan on addressing this in a way that the current governor hasn't?
Well, first and foremost, the key thing is that we have to have the supporting cast in the Texas State House and the State Senate. So that when I lay down and say these are my emergency priorities, because in January of 2023, when you deliver the State of the State address and you list those gubernatorial priorities that you have, which will be based upon the legislative powers of the Republican Party, the legislature has to immediately get working on those things. So you, as the governor, you basically own the legislature for those first 60, almost 70 days before the March 12th time period kicks in. So we got to make sure that we have the right people there to support that. And that's why it's so important that folks get out and voting in this primary election season. There are a lot of incumbents that don't need to go back, and that includes people like the lieutenant governor. And we need to make sure that we have the right type of constitutional conservatives that are paying attention to these issues like this preeminent to you, especially for our families, so that we have the right type of Speaker of the House and not someone like a Dave Phelan who is more so worried about corporate and business interests.
Absolutely. And guys, I believe primary voting started this past Monday. Is that correct, Colonel?
You're absolutely right. It started past Monday, and it ends a week from today, next week, Friday. And then, of course, the election day is March the 1st.
All right, guys, please get out there and vote. We need to get the man in office. I'm going to bring you some questions here, Colonel. This comes from YouTube. It says, as governor, what will you do to stop school teacher and administrators from affirming transing kids secretly from parents?
Well, that's the thing about transparency. And when you find out these things, you have to have investigations. You also can withhold funds. And again, that's one of the legislative priorities. I don't understand why we still don't have an ending to child gender modification procedures and surgeries here in Texas. Puberty blockers, hormonal therapies, physical surgeries we give to our children as young as 8. But there was an article that came out of the Katy Christian News this week, and the lieutenant governor, the governor, and the Speaker of the House combined got $2.4 million of campaign contributions from people that run gender modification clinics. So now everyone in Texas, that your children have been sold out, not for 30 pieces of silver, but for $2.4 million. No one's going to buy me off. We're going to do what's right. We're going to end this whole thing about child gender modification surgeries and processes and procedures here in Texas.
Yes, sir. I saw you said that, the government has no jurisdiction on marriage. I think that goes with this next question from Saving Fatherhood on YouTube. He said, will you use an executive order to end unconstitutional marriage licenses which violate religious freedom and prevent troubled marriages from attempting reconciliation, protection orders, and no-fault divorce?
Well, when I say that, I meant the federal government. Marriage licenses are done at the state level. And so you got to get back to understanding the right roles and responsibilities of the federal government first and foremost. In Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it lists the 18 things that the federal government, really their duties and responsibilities, the roles, the things that they're supposed to have the jurisdiction over. The 10th Amendment says all of those powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people. And so if this is something that is critical, if this is something that the constituents here in the state of Texas want to see happen, it gets passed in the Senate and the House, absolutely, I'll sign it and make sure of that, because we are the ones that have the jurisdiction over marriage. And let me get everyone to understand, there is no law on same-sex marriage in the United States of America. It was a court case, Obergefell versus Hodges, that the Supreme Court ruled on, but the Supreme Court is supposed to interpret law. The Supreme Court does not make law. And so if it has not gone through the House, it has not gone through the Senate, there is no law about same-sex marriage.
Yes, sir. Taryn Champagne said, what will you do to get legislation passed for equal parenting when the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee is hostile and holds bills till the end of the legislative session?
Well, that's another one of the things that I can do to make that one of the early gubernatorial legislative priorities. And so when you look at HB 803, I'd like to see HB 803 get passed through because, coming out of the Black community, back when I was born 61 years ago, the two-parent household in the Black community was 77%. Today is 24%. So government has really destroyed the traditional nuclear family in the Black community. I think they're seeking to do it throughout. So we've got to make sure that we protect that. And there's some things that we can do to reform. I mean, the family court system needs to have some reforms done there. And then there's also, let me make sure I read it right, Section 201 dot 107 Charlie. This thing that we don't have a fairness in looking at this, a means testing of the incomes of both of the parents. We cannot put one parent to a disadvantage over the other parent. And so that's why I believe in equality of parenting, just the same as I believe in equality of opportunity. But once again, you got to make sure that you're voting for the right legislators in the state house and the state senate who will take this issue, get it passed in those respective bodies, and get it to me to sign.
Yes, sir. Why do you think, Alan, that traditional nuclear family is such a target right now?
Because they don't believe in that. They believe in destroying that. Because, if you go back and you read Hitler, you read Lenin, you read Stalin, you read Mao, it is all about the control of children. It is all about breaking down that familial bond. And it's all about destroying the Judeo-Christian faith heritage. It's all about the secular humanist mind is that the government with the little g is control of everything, not God through the family, because that's what he established with Adam and Eve. They don't believe in that. And they want to see that destroyed. And that's why we have this chaos of this gender dysphoria that is out there confusing our children.
And it is awful. We're seeing it more and more every day. Got a question from Mr. Mark Escobar. He said, Tennessee is trying to pass a law that states if you are behind in child support, your parenting time will be obstructed. With no fault divorce, would this mean poor people who were forced into divorce could be blocked from their kids? If a bill like this came to you as governor, would you veto it?
Yes, I would, because once again, we got to think about the children. We want to make sure that the children, even though there may be a dispute between the parents or whatever, they can't get along, but the child needs to know that they still have a mother and father that love them, and they need to be able to have that relationship with their mother and father. But when you start to, again, as I stated, penalizing one parent, to the advantage of the other parent, and that's why I talk about means testing of incomes when we look at this whole thing about child support, because in many ways the government is responsible for this scourge across our country called fatherlessness.
Yeah. I knew this question would come up. This comes from Mr. Mike Preserve. He said, will you accept Social Security Title 4D funds and incentives for the state or reject it? I know there's a lot of incentives in there that people believe is, kind of directly responsible for breaking apart that nuclear family, and they've incentivized divorce.
Well, and that's one of the things I think that, not just taking this one issue of Title 4D, but overall issues, we have got to make sure that if we're taking funds from the federal government, the strings that are attached to them, if they are not in concert with constitutional conservative principles and values, we reject it. And I give you a great case in point, the elementary and secondary education relief funding, the ESSER funding that we're getting from the federal government, and it's supposed to go to the schools, to help them get past the COVID issue. But one of the strings attached to that is that 20% of the ESSER funds has to go to social emotional learning. And guess what? We're still accepting it here in the state of Texas. And so therefore, we have given $2.4 billion over to making sure that social emotional learning, which is the cultural indoctrination, Marxist indoctrination of our children, is happening in our schools. So no, anytime you see things that are coming down that have strings attached, that are the antithesis of my philosophies and beliefs and the principles and values that we want to see here in Texas, no, we're not going to allow that to happen.
Yes, sir. Love it. Mr. Jeff Morgan on YouTube said the state of Texas has ignored Judge Janice Jack Graham's orders to fix CPS and foster care. How will you fix these two systems?
It's very simple. We're going to get rid of the hierarchy in that bureaucracy. One of the great things about being a governor is that you have the power of appointments, and CPS is broken. And I already kind of know the person that I want to have step in to run CPS because she has a heart for children. And one of the things that is very disconcerting, something that we should be concerned about, is, Texas is the #1 state in the United States of America for human and sex trafficking. And in many ways, our own CPS is aiding and abetting sex trafficking here in the state of Texas.
Yes, sir. So I was reading about that earlier on your website. It said Houston and Dallas is the top 2 cities for sex
Yes.
trafficking in the country.
Yeah.
Uh, can you give us a little insight on what's going on with that there?
Well, a lot of these kids that are part of the CPS system, they're being pushed out of the system, falling through the cracks or what have you. And people are out there looking for those very vulnerable young people that they can attract on social media, what have you, and they get them involved in the sex trafficking industry. Not to mention the fact that since we have such an open and porous border, we're allowing the sex trafficking to come across, and that's fueling that industry even more so. The cartels are making 25 to 30 million dollars a week just on human trafficking. And we got to do better than that. That's why when you look at our border, it's a drug trafficking issue, it's a human and sex trafficking issue, it's a public health crisis issue. And that's the number one thing that I got to get fixed for the people here in the state of Texas. But yeah, we're going to clean house in the CPS.
Yes, sir. Mr. Charles Longevin on Facebook said, "What can we do to support you, Colonel? We need good, family-friendly people in office." And I agree 100%.
Well, that's the product of who I am. I had a great mom and dad that set me on the right path. My dad served in World War II in a segregated army. He was a corporal then, and my mom did 25 years plus civilian service to the 6th Marine Corps District headquarters in Atlanta. And they're buried together because so as they were in life, so as they are in death, buried together in Marietta National Cemetery. So I do believe in strong families, and I think that when the family is weak, the country is weak. And we see Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter said that they are against the traditional nuclear family, and so that is part of the destruction of the Black community. So you go to West, the number 4Texas.com, West4Texas.com. The most important thing right now, if you have not voted, plan on getting out to vote. Like I said, early voting ends next week, Friday. There is no early voting on Monday because it's a holiday. That's President's Day. And the election day is March the 1st. But not just you vote. Go out and find 10, 15, 20 of your friends and make sure they understand that there is an election, because a lot of people, Eric, you know very well, they do not realize there's a primary election coming up.
No, they don't. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted to do this. I can't thank you enough for Colonel for, standing up for these issues. Because I mean, a lot of these parents have been begging somebody to do exactly what you're doing. But guys, if you don't get out and vote, it's going to hurt us. So make sure you do that. There is a very important case that's going on in the state of Texas right now, Colonel. I don't know if you've heard about this. Jeff Morgan brought it up. He said on November 5th, 2021, Chad Reed was murdered by his ex-wife's boyfriend during a custody exchange. No charges have been filed against him. If you were governor, could you do anything about this?
Well, you got to be very careful about tipping the scales of law, because you want to make sure that it's balanced. But I would look into it to make sure that due process is occurring and there's nothing nefarious that is going on, and that we're following the rule of law. So that's an important thing that I will look into to make sure that if someone has been properly arrested, properly charged, that the court process goes on. But we have to remember that you're innocent until proven guilty. But we want to make sure that everything is going in the right way.
Yes, sir. Taryn Champagne said, the Texas Constitution states that the court shall be open. What will you do to rein in judges who routinely conduct hearings closed off to the public? Conduct star chamber proceedings.
Yeah, I remember that movie with Michael Douglas, The Star Chamber. Maybe some folks, maybe the old heads like myself do. We cannot have that type of behind the curtain operations. And you see what has been going on down in the Round Rock Independent School District, where you have the school board meeting behind closed doors. We got to make sure we have transparency, because we're public servants. We're here to serve the people and not the opposite way around. So I will make sure that if it needs to be by an executive order, or definitely a letter that I send out, that everyone in a government position in the state of Texas understands that you do not close doors and lock people out from any proceedings that are going on. If so, you're going to see the old colonel come out in me.
Yes, sir. Mark Escobel talked about something that we hear a lot. He said, will you beef up the fraud department to help curb the false allegations that are used for financial gain in the court system? It seems like right now that somebody can just make any type of allegation against you. If you prove that it was false, there's no consequence.
Well, there has to be consequences. And I think that's the most important thing that has to occur, because so often there are never any consequences or ramifications. I'm a guy, I'm not looking at growing government anymore, because guess what? If you want me to beef up the fraud department, you want me to hire more people, that means that you're going to be paying for more people. And I think right now we should be looking at how we reduce the burden of the citizens to pay for, an expansive and growing government. So the most important thing is that when we find these out, we've got to make sure that there are penalties and consequences for people that are doing that. It may mean a misdemeanor offense, and it definitely should mean some type of restitution thereof. And that's how you discourage people from going out there and making these false allegations, if they know eventually, if I'm caught, I'm going to have to pay a price.
Absolutely. Joseph Lowry said, how can we save Jeff Younger's boys from the judge that's allowing such vile things? I mean, you talked a little bit about the gender modification.
Yeah.
Earlier. I cannot believe this is going on in the state of Texas, and I can't believe that the governor hasn't done anything about it.
Okay, let me go back to what I said. $2.4 million in contributions from gender modification clinics to the governor, to the lieutenant governor, and to the Speaker of the House in Texas. You follow the money in politics and you find out the fastest growing aspect of the medical field in the state of Texas are these gender modifications, gender transition clinics here in Texas. And guess what? If they want to be able to grow, they have to get political favor. And how do you get political favor? You write a check. And so again, I will reiterate, Judas, gave up Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Speaker of the House, Dave Phelan, gave up your children for $2.4 million.
That is disgusting. I mean, and we see it in politics all the time, and that is a very sad thing. Derek Hansen on YouTube said, what is your stance on absolute immunity for judges? Shouldn't anyone violating the Constitution and law be held accountable, especially people that have the power to ruin people's lives?
No one is above the rule of law, and that includes the governor of the state of Texas. So when the governor of the state of Texas violates the Texas state constitution, he should be held accountable for that. The governor, after 30 days of an emergency, is supposed to bring the legislature in for any subsequent decisions, but you did not see Governor Abbott do that. So he believes that he's above the rule of law. He believes that he has enumerated power to decide who or what is essential in the state of Texas. 2.7 million Texans lost jobs. Close to 10,000 small businesses bankrupt, never coming back. So everyone is accountable to the rule of law, and we have to make sure that that happens. And like I said, the example starts with me, and I will make sure that everyone in the state of Texas that's in an elected government position understands that.
Yes, sir. John Stambeck just said, Colonel West has got my vote on March 1st. Yeah. We have a comment here that says, Beth Gardner of Temple wants to know if you have any plans to reduce or eliminate income tax, and if so, what's the alternative source of revenue for the state?
Well, first and foremost, Beth, we do not have a state income tax. That's why a lot of people like being here in Texas, and that's codified in our Constitution. What we do have is a property tax system, and the property tax system that we have in Texas is the sixth highest in the United States of America. It was really based upon the economic philosophies of Karl Marx. It's a progressive tax system. It continues to go up. And the other thing is that it eliminates private property rights. You can pay off your land in Texas. You can pay off your mortgage in Texas. You can never own your home under this property tax system. So I want to transition us away from this property tax system to how we used to do taxation in America prior to 1917, and that was a consumption-based system. That's also called the fair tax. It's based upon what you go out and you purchase and you buy yourself. And that way we can get that passed in the House, we get that passed in the Senate in the legislative session next year. And that's one of the emergency priorities. I signed that into law. It comes back to you all, the people of Texas, to vote on it in the November 2023 constitutional amendment elections. And two things, no changes to the consumption-based tax rates or tax system unless the Texas people get to vote on it. Second thing, the property tax system is eliminated, and that goes into the Constitution. So the only way anybody could try to bring it back, they got to bring it back before the people.
Yes, sir. Ken Cunningham said, Lieutenant West, if Texas goes 50-50 custody, people like me will need to be grandfathered in, and that has not been talked about. Will you meet with parents like us to help form the legislation?
Well, it's not just me. I mean, I am your servant, but you need to also find out who is your member in the Texas State House, who is your member in the Texas State Senate. And so you get them to be involved in that and make that a part of HB 803, which is the Equality of Parenting bill that, was not able to get passed in the last legislative session, but I want to see it get passed and I want to be able to sign it into law. But I need you to come down there during that legislative session as a parent and meet with people and make sure that grandfather clause is in there. And I'd be happy to sign that into legislation,
Yes,
into
sir.
law. I'm sorry.
We have another question here, and I seen you address this in your issues. They said, how would you reform the Texas child support system?
Well, that's what we just talked about, removal of that section 201.107C. And we also want to make sure that we means test the income so that we're not putting an undue burden on one parent to the advantage of another parent and to the total disadvantage of the child. Because then what is happening is that when you push one parent into financial destitution, then the next thing you know, the child is not going to be able to go and spend any time with that parent because someone can complain he can't take care or she can't take care of that parent. Most times it's the father. And so we want to find that balance. And that comes back to the previous question about, the 50-50. And I think it has to be equality of parenting and not just this one size fits all cookie cutter approach.
Yes, sir. I had a question. Where do you stand on mask mandates and the Pledge of Allegiance for our kids in schools?
Look, no mask mandates. Okay. We do not live in a constitutional monarchy. We live in a constitutional republic. Edicts, orders, mandates, and decrees don't equal law. And so we're going to get back to the rule of law. As far as the Pledge of Allegiance, I have no problems with the Pledge of Allegiance as well as the Texas Pledge as well. And I think we got to get back to teaching civics and we got to get back to teaching history. And I think that's really important for our young people. I really get irate when I hear young people talk down the United States of America, how they hate it and it's a bad and racist country and all this stuff. I want everybody on Dad Talk right now to look at me and understand 61 years ago in this month, I was born in a blacks only hospital. Now, how just 6 decades ago, born in a blacks only hospital, I can be a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, command 600 men in combat. My dad was only a corporal in the segregated army. I can be a member of the United States House of Representatives, to include Palm Beach Island, which is where Mar-a-Lago is and which is where Rush Limbaugh lived. And so they were my constituents. I can be the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, the largest state Republican party in the nation. And now I'm running to be governor of the state of Texas. So we've got to get back to understanding the fundamentals and the foundations of this great nation. And I think that we've got to get a respect back for our nation as well, because there have been so many men and women that have made the last full measure of devotion. And we got to get our kids to respect that.
Yes, sir. What plans do you have to prevent or decay the systematic indoctrination in our public schools?
Number one, you don't provide any funding to any of these independent school districts that want to do critical race theory, cultural Marxism, cultural competency action plan, or social emotional learning. I would tell people to look at what just happened in the Carroll ISD, South Lake, Texas, and look what happened in the Cy-Fair Independent School District, third largest school district in the state of Texas. The parents, the people, they took charge of this thing. They got people to run for school board. Now they're flipping school boards. Look at what just happened up there in Virginia. So it's not just what, I'm going to do. Remember what John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Ask what you can do for Texas. Ask what you can do for your children, in your homes, in your churches, in your communities. So I want to see more people running for a school board. I want to see more people paying attention to who sits on the Texas State Board of Education. There are some people that are up for election in those positions. 15-member Board of Education. And guess what? They determine the curriculum, the books that are used in educating our kids. And on top of that, the rest of the nation follows the recommendations of the Texas State Board of Education. And let me tell you something. If there's pornographic, obscene material in a school library, I don't need to write a letter to someone asking, is that child abuse or is that bad? I know it's bad. And it's a felony offense when you're providing obscene pornographic material to minors. Someone's going to go to jail.
It seems like common sense has left the room on some of this. This is something that you would have never had to have somebody tell you that this is wrong. But we live in such a crazy world right now. But, I know we talked a lot about family law, and that's definitely something that is affecting that nuclear family and the relationship with the kids and parents. What are some of the other issues that you're fighting for, Alan, that many watching might not necessarily understand just how that affects families and that we need to address.
I think without a doubt, we've got to make sure that families can be successful, and we have to make sure that everyone has the equality of opportunity. Right now in Texas, fourth graders, we got 67% of our fourth graders don't read at grade level. That's not setting our kids up for success, but yet we're tearing up the families. We're tearing up the system of education. We're giving them all of these tools of indoctrination. So we just got to get back to the blocking and tackling. We've got to remember that individual rights, freedoms, and liberties, that's the preeminent responsibility of the government to protect. The government does not exist to protect your health. That's your responsibility to protect your health. We're supposed to protect your rights. And I think that is the critical thing. And on top of that, we got to make sure that the balance between the federal government and the state governments is restored. Because as it says in the Declaration of Independence, free and independent states created these United States of America. But what we see happening is the federal government pushing more of their ideology, more of their mandates, more of their decrees down on the states. We got to be able to reject that.
Yes, sir. And a good portion of our audience that writes into me all the times that breaks my heart is veterans that are facing
Oh,
the
yeah.
issues inside a family court. They go and fight for
Mhm.
us overseas, and then when they come back, wife's gone, and then PTSD is used against them in
Yeah.
court. Is there something that we can do to address that? Because it seems like so many of these guys' service
Mhm.
to our nation is being used against them.
I think one of the things I know that Collin County has it, and when I was a member of Congress back in Florida, we had it. It's called a Veterans Court, where you get some of these judges that have been prior military. They specifically have veterans come before them because there's a better understanding, a better relationship. So we may need to look and see how many more veterans courts we can get out there across Texas. And the other thing is we cannot have homeless veterans in the state of Texas. Let me tell you a story that I heard about down there in the Rio Grande Valley. Is that you got these non-governmental organizations, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Ministries. They're the ones that are bringing illegals in. They're giving them $1,300, $1,400 taxpayer money, giving them buses, giving them cell phones, putting them up in very nice hotels and things of this nature. Well, there was a homeless veteran that showed up at one of these quote unquote charitable organizations. They turned the veteran away. That should not be happening in the state of Texas or anywhere in the United States of America. So I will not allow any of these non-governmental organizations that are aiding and abetting human and sex trafficking to turn away a veteran. So we're going to revoke their licenses from operating here in the state of Texas.
Absolutely. Guys, we're getting a ton of questions down there in the comments that if you'll go to the beginning of the episode, me and the Colonel have definitely addressed. I'm going to give one more question because I know you're a busy man, and I thank you so much for giving us your time and talking to the people.
My pleasure.
Joseph Lowry said, will you beef up a police force to go after corrupted cities? For instance, having more departments for investigating corruptions in cities like Lamarck, Texas.
Well, you already have the Texas Rangers. That's something they're supposed to be doing, and we want to make sure that they continue to do that. And we're looking at these corrupt police departments, especially. We got some corrupt police departments down along the Rio Grande River that have been infiltrated by the money of the cartels. And the cartels are not a business organization. They're a terrorist organization. We're going to start freezing their assets and seizing those assets. But absolutely right. We want to make sure that we restore law and order. And I want you to think about this. The capital city of Texas, Austin, Texas, has the third highest increase of homicide in the United States of America. You look at what is going on down in Houston, Harris County, where you have these activist judges that are releasing violent criminals and felons back onto the streets on no reconnaissance bonds, just letting them go. And 155 Houstonians have directly lost their lives because violent felons have gone back onto the streets. The Texas State Constitution, Article 15, Section 8, gives the governor the ability to start impeachment proceedings against judges that aren't following the rule of law. So we're going to be using that. And so we're going to make sure that our streets are safe and secure for families out there in the state of Texas, and especially along our border communities.
Yes, sir. Alan, I know we talked about it once, but one more time on the way out of here, we're at the finishing line. How can everybody get out there and support you?
Sure. The number 4, Texas.com, west4texas.com. And again, I implore you, next week, that's the end of early voting. And Monday is a federal holiday, President's Day. So there's no early voting on Monday. And then Tuesday, March the 1st, is the primary election day. We need a good, strong turnout. Go out and find out all of your members, your city council members, school board members, county commissions, judges, the state House members, state Senate members, all of those people that are running, do your due diligence, do your research, and select the best person that you want to go out there and be your champion, be your warrior, be your public servant.
Yes, sir. Colonel, God bless you. Thank you so much. And good luck out there on the campaign.
Thank you so much, Eric. We'll see you next time.